Simba, the mighty king of the Pride Lands, stood tall on the familiar red earth. The sun warmed his golden fur as he surveyed the horizon. He was on border patrol, a duty he took seriously, even though he sometimes grumbled about leaving his comfortable spot on Pride Rock. He liked to stretch his legs and feel the wind in his mane. It reminded him of his younger days, running free with Nala. "Everything looks peaceful, Your Majesty," Zazu chirped, flitting nervously above him. Simba chuckled. "Relax, Zazu. A king needs to see his kingdom, not just hear about it." He puffed out his chest, tried to appear regal, but a playful glint remained in his eyes. He was still Simba, the adventurous cub at heart. He walked along the edge of the Outlands, the desolate area where Scar's hyena army had roamed. Since Scar's defeat, the hyenas had been banished, but Simba always kept a watchful eye. He knew that old grudges could fester and that some hyenas might still harbor resentment. He remembered his father, Mufasa, telling him about the circle of life, how everything was connected. Simba believed in that, but he also knew that some creatures were harder to trust than others. He paused, sniffing the air. Something felt different today. A faint, acrid scent lingered on the breeze, a smell that made his fur prickle. "Zazu, keep a sharp lookout," Simba commanded, his voice losing its playful tone. Something's not right. He tensed, ready for anything. He was the king, and it was his job to protect his pride, no matter the cost. He might enjoy his relaxing moments, but he would always be ready to spring into action. Suddenly, a snarling hyena leaped from behind a rocky outcrop, followed by several more. Their eyes gleamed with a hungry, vengeful light. Simba roared, a sound that echoed across the plains, but he was outnumbered. "Hyenas!" Zazu shrieked, darting back towards Pride Rock. "Attack! Attack!" The hyenas swarmed Simba, their claws tearing at his fur. He fought bravely, his powerful paws sending some of them sprawling, but they kept coming, relentless and determined. He recognized some of their faces, descendants of the hyenas who had served Scar. This wasn't just a random attack. It was personal. One hyena lunged for his throat, but Simba twisted, deflecting the blow. Another nipped at his legs, trying to trip him. He stumbled, losing his balance for a fraction of a second, and that was all the hyenas needed. They piled on top of him, a mass of snapping jaws and sharp claws. Simba roared again, a desperate cry for help, but his voice was muffled by the weight of the hyenas. He felt a sharp pain in his side, then another in his leg. He was weakening, his strength fading. Darkness started to creep in at the edges of his vision. He tried to fight back, but it was no use. The hyenas were too many, their hatred too strong. With a final, exhausted groan, Simba succumbed to the darkness, his body going limp beneath the weight of his attackers. The hyenas, panting and snarling, stepped back, leaving the king lying unconscious on the dusty ground. They exchanged triumphant glances, then disappeared back into the shadows, leaving Simba alone in the silence of the Outlands. The sun beat down on Simba's unconscious form. Vultures circled overhead, their shadows ominous against the dusty ground. But then a different shadow fell across him, a smaller, more cautious shadow. It was a hyena, but unlike the others, this one didn't snarl or bare her teeth. She was younger, her fur a lighter shade of brown, and her eyes held a flicker of something other than hatred. Jire, daughter of Shinsi, had witnessed the attack from distance. She had been taught to hate Simba, to see him as the enemy, but something inside her felt uneasy. She remembered stories her mother told her, whispers of a different time when hyenas and lions weren't always at odds. The other hyenas had celebrated their victory, eager to return to the pack with news of Simba's demise. But Jire couldn't shake the feeling that what they had done was wrong. She knew that if Simba died, the fragile peace that had existed since Scar's reign would shatter. Ignoring the calls of her clan, Jire approached Simba cautiously. She nudged him with her nose, checking for any sign of life. He groaned softly, confirming that he was still alive, though barely. Jire knew she had a choice to make. She could leave him to die, fulfilling the hyena's desire for revenge, or she could do something unexpected, something that could change everything. Her heart pounded in her chest. She knew this decision would not be easy. She knew she would be going against her clan. But she couldn't leave Simba to die. Jire knew she couldn't leave Simba where he was. The vultures would pick him clean, or worse, her own clan might return to finish the job. She had to get him to safety, and fast. With a grunt, she began to drag him, pulling him away from the scene of the ambush. Simba was heavy, and Jire was small, but she was determined. She pulled him towards a hidden ravine, a place she knew well from her childhood. It was a secret spot, shielded from the harsh sun and hidden from prying eyes. The ravine was narrow and difficult to navigate, but it was the safest place she could think of. It took her hours, but finally she managed to get Simba to the bottom of the ravine. She collapsed beside him, panting and exhausted. She had to find water. She knew of a small spring nearby, but she hesitated to leave Simba alone, even for a moment. Taking a deep breath, Jire set off towards the spring. She lapped up the cool water, then soaked her fur and returned to Simba. She gently dabbed the water on his wounds, hoping to ease his pain and prevent infection. She knew she wasn't a healer, but it was the best she could do. As the sun began to set, Jire settled down beside Simba, keeping watch. She knew that her clan would eventually discover what she had done, and she would have to face the consequences. But for now, all that mattered was keeping Simba alive. She had a plan, a daring plan that could change the future of the Pride Lands and the Outlands forever. But first, Simba had to recover. Simba groaned, his head throbbing. He blinked, trying to focus his blurry vision. Where was he? The last thing he remembered was the hyenas, their snarling faces, their sharp claws. He tried to sit up, but a sharp pain shot through his side, forcing him back down. "Easy, Your Majesty," a voice said softly. Simba turned his head, his eyes widening in surprise. Standing beside him was a hyena. But this wasn't one of the snarling, hateful hyenas from his nightmare. This one looked concerned. "Where am I?" Simba asked, his voice raspy. "And who are you?" "You're in a safe place," the hyena replied. "My name is Jire." Simba frowned. "Jire? But you're a hyena. Why did you save me?" Jire hesitated for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "It's complicated. The others wanted you dead, but I couldn't let them." "But why?" Simba repeated, confused. "You're supposed to be my enemy." "I know," Jire said, looking down. "But things don't have to be that way. I saved you, Your Majesty, but I need your help now." Simba stared at her, his mind racing. What could a hyena possibly want from him, especially one who had saved his life? He felt a strange mix of gratitude and suspicion. He knew he should be wary, but he couldn't deny that Jire had saved him from certain death. He decided to hear her out. "What kind of help?" he asked cautiously. "What do you want?" "My clan," Jire began, her voice firm despite her nervousness. "We've been living in the Outlands ever since Scar was defeated. It's a harsh life, Your Majesty. Food is scarce, and the land is barren. We're not all like the hyenas who followed Scar. We just want a chance to live in peace." Simba listened intently, his suspicions slowly giving way to a glimmer of understanding. He knew the Outlands were a difficult place to survive. He had seen the suffering firsthand. "What do you want me to do?" Simba asked, still cautious. "I want you to grant my clan a place in the Pride Lands," Jire said, her eyes meeting Simba's. "A place where we can live and hunt, just like the lions." Simba was taken aback. This was a huge request, one that would surely be met with resistance from his pride. He knew that many lions still harbored deep resentment towards the hyenas because of Scar. "That's a lot to ask, Jire," Simba said, shaking his head. "The lions won't be happy. They still remember what happened with Scar." "I know it's difficult," Jire replied, "but we're not asking for much. Just a small piece of land, enough to sustain us. We're willing to follow your laws, to respect the circle of life. We just want a chance to prove that we're not all evil." Simba considered her words. He believed in fairness and justice, but he also had a responsibility to protect his pride. This was a difficult decision, one that could have far-reaching consequences. He looked at Jire, seeing the hope in her eyes. He knew he couldn't dismiss her request out of hand. "I need time to think about it," he said finally. "I need to talk to my pride." "I appreciate that, Your Majesty," Jire said, "but I need more than just your consideration. My clan needs to see that you're serious. I need you to grant me an audience at Pride Rock." Simba's eyes widened. "An audience?" "Jire, that's impossible. The lions will never agree to meet with a hyena, let alone your entire clan." "Then just me," Jire countered. "Let me speak to your pride, to explain our situation. If they see that we're not monsters, that we just want a chance to live in peace, maybe they'll be willing to reconsider." Simba hesitated. He knew that taking Jire to Pride Rock was a huge risk. It could cause panic, even violence. But he also knew that Jire was right. If he wanted to bridge the gap between lions and hyenas, he needed to be bold. "All right, Jire," Simba said, his voice resolute. "I'll grant you an audience at Pride Rock, but you have to promise me that you'll remain peaceful no matter what happens." "I promise, Your Majesty," Jire replied, her eyes shining with hope. "I just want a chance to be heard." Simba knew he was taking a gamble, but he trusted his instincts. He believed that Jire was different, that she genuinely wanted peace. He also knew that he couldn't make this journey alone. He needed to send a message to Pride Rock to let them know he was alive and that he was bringing a guest. "I need to send Zazu ahead," Simba said, "to let everyone know we're coming." Jire nodded. It was time to face Pride Rock. Zazu, with a frantic flapping of wings, arrived at Pride Rock, his message a jumbled mess of panic and disbelief. "Simba, he's alive, but there's a hyena. He's bringing a hyena." Nala, who had been pacing anxiously since Simba's patrol, rushed forward. "A hyena? What's going on, Zazu? Explain yourself." Timon and Pumbaa, overhearing the commotion, huddled together in fear. "Hyenas? Back in the Pride Lands? This is not Hakuna Matata." Timon squeaked. Zazu, finally managing to compose himself, delivered the message as clearly as he could. "Simba is alive, but he's injured. A hyena saved him, a hyena named Jire. And Simba is bringing her here, to Pride Rock." Chaos erupted. Lions roared in protest, cubs whimpered in fear, and even the usually calm Nala looked stunned. Simba would never, unless... She trailed off, her brow furrowed in thought. Rafiki, who had been observing the scene with his usual knowing smile, stepped forward. "The winds of change are blowing, my friends. Sometimes, the greatest challenges bring the greatest opportunities." Despite Rafiki's words, the pride was divided. Some, fueled by old hatreds, wanted to attack the hyena on sight. Others, trusting in Simba's judgment, were willing to wait and see. Nala, torn between her loyalty to Simba and her concern for her pride, knew she had to keep the peace until Simba arrived. She looked at the worried faces around her. This was going to be a difficult day. A low growl rippled through the assembled lions as Simba and Jire approached Pride Rock. The sight of the king, limping and weary, accompanied by a hyena, was almost too much to bear. Nala stepped forward, her expression a mixture of relief and apprehension. "Simba!" she exclaimed, rushing to his side. "You're alive, but what is this? Why is there a hyena with you?" Simba leaned against Nala for support, his voice weak but firm. "Nala, everyone, this is Jire. She saved my life. She deserves your respect." The lions shifted uneasily, their eyes fixed on Jire. She stood tall, her gaze steady, but Simba could see the fear in her eyes. He knew this was a difficult situation for her too. "Respect," a gruff voice boomed. It was Kovu, one of the younger lions, his face contorted with anger. "They're hyenas. They're the enemy. They serve Scar." "Kovu, that's enough." Nala snapped, her voice sharp. "Simba is our king. We will listen to what he has to say." Simba nodded gratefully to Nala. "I know this is difficult to understand," he said, addressing the pride. "But Jire is not like the other hyenas. She risked her own life to save mine. She has come here to ask for our help." He paused, taking a deep breath. Jasire's clan is struggling in the Outlands. They want a chance to live in peace, to follow the circle of life. They're asking for a small piece of land in the Pride Lands, where they can hunt and raise their families. A chorus of protests erupted, but Simba held up his paw, silencing the crowd. I know this is a lot to consider, he said, but I believe that everyone deserves a chance. We need to hear Jire out to listen to her story. Then we can decide what to do. As Jire prepared to speak, Rafiki hobbled forward, his staff tapping against the rock. Wait, he said, his voice ancient and wise. There is a story that must be told, a story from the time of Mufasa. The lions quieted, their attention turning to the old baboon. Rafiki began to speak, his voice echoing across Pride Rock. Long ago, when Mufasa was king, a terrible drought struck the Pride Lands. The river dried up, the grass withered, and the animals suffered. Mufasa, in his wisdom, sought help from all creatures, even those he did not fully trust. A clan of hyenas, led by a wise matriarch, offered to help. They knew the location of a hidden spring, a place where water still flowed. Mufasa, desperate to save his kingdom, made a promise to the hyenas. If they led him to the spring and helped him bring water back to the Pride Lands, he would grant them a small piece of land within the kingdom, a place where they could always find water. Rafiki paused, his eyes twinkling. The hyenas kept their promise. They led Mufasa to the spring, and the water flowed once more. The Pride Lands were saved. A murmur rippled through the crowd. None of them had ever heard this story before. Simba looked at Rafiki, his eyes wide with surprise. I never knew, he whispered. Mufasa never spoke of it openly, Rafiki said. The promise was made in secret, known only to a few. But a promise is a promise, Simba. Even a king must honor his word. Simba was stunned. He had always looked up to his father, seeing him as a symbol of strength, wisdom, and unwavering justice. But this was a side of Mufasa he had never known. A secret promise, made in a moment of desperation. He looked at Jire, then at the faces of his pride. He could see the fear, the anger, the distrust. How could he possibly ask them to accept hyenas into their land, especially after everything that had happened with Scar? But then he thought of Mufasa, of his father's unwavering commitment to doing what was right. He remembered the lessons he had taught him about the circle of life, about respecting all creatures, about honoring your word. He felt torn. On one hand, he had a duty to protect his pride, to keep them safe from harm. On the other hand, he had a duty to honor his father's promise, to uphold the values that Mufasa had instilled in him. I don't know what to do, Simba admitted, his voice filled with uncertainty. I need time to think. This is a difficult decision, one that could change everything. Nala stepped forward, placing a reassuring paw on Simba's shoulder. We understand, Simba, she said. We know this isn't easy. We'll support you, no matter what you decide. Simba looked at Nala, grateful for her unwavering support. He knew he couldn't make this decision alone. He needed to seek guidance from those he trusted, to weigh the pros and cons, to find a way to honor his father's promise while protecting his kingdom. He knew that it would be a long night of difficult discussions, but he was determined to find the right path. He looked to Rafiki for guidance. Later that night, after the pride had settled down, Simba sought out Jire. He found her sitting alone on the edge of Pride Rock, gazing out at the dark expanse of the Outlands. Jire, Simba said softly, approaching her cautiously. Thank you for waiting. Jire turned, her eyes meeting Simba's. Of course, Your Majesty. I understand this is a difficult time for you. Simba sat down beside her, the weight of his responsibility heavy on his shoulders. Tell me about your clan, he said. Tell me about your life in the Outlands. Jire began to speak, her voice filled with a quiet sadness. She described the constant struggle for survival, the scarcity of food, the harshness of the land. She spoke of the hyenas who had never known the Pride Lands, who had only heard stories of a better life. She told Simba about the wise matriarch who led her clan, about her efforts to teach them the importance of respecting the circle of life, about her dreams of finding a peaceful solution. As Simba listened, he began to see Jire and her clan in a new light. He realized that they were not just mindless scavengers, but living creatures with hopes, fears, and dreams, just like the lions. He started to understand their desperation, their desire for a better life. "I didn't realize how hard it was," Simba admitted, his voice filled with compassion. "I'm sorry." Jire nodded, a faint smile gracing her lips. "Thank you for listening, Your Majesty. That means a lot to us." Simba knew that hearing Jire's story had changed him. He still had concerns, but he was now more determined than ever to find a way to help her clan. He realized that Mufasa's promise was not just about land. It was about understanding, forgiveness, and compassion. He felt the weight of Mufasa's legacy in his soul. He had to do right. He just needed a plan. The next morning, Simba called a meeting of the pride. He stood before them, his heart heavy, knowing that what he was about to say would not be easy to hear. "My friends," Simba began, his voice strong and clear, "I have spent the night thinking about Mufasa's promise, about Jire's plea, and about the future of the Pride Lands. I believe that we must honor my father's word. I believe that we must give Jire's clan a chance." A wave of murmurs swept through the crowd. Kovu stepped forward, his eyes blazing with anger. "Are you serious, Simba? You're going to let hyenas live here? After everything they've done?" "They're not all like Scar," Simba countered, his voice firm. "Jire saved my life. She has shown me that there are hyenas who want peace, who want to respect the circle of life." "But they're hyenas," another lioness protested. "They're scavengers. They'll steal our food. They'll attack our cubs." "We can set boundaries," Nala interjected, her voice calm and reassuring. "We can create rules to ensure that everyone is safe. We can give them a designated area where they can hunt and live, away from the main Pride Lands." "And what if they break those rules?" Kova challenged. "What if they betray us like Scar did?" "Then we will deal with it," Simba replied, his eyes meeting Kovu's. "But we cannot let fear and prejudice cloud our judgment. We must give them a chance to prove themselves." The debate raged on, some lions passionately arguing against the idea, others cautiously supporting it. Simba listened patiently, hearing their fears, their concerns, and their hopes. He knew that he couldn't force them to accept his decision, but he hoped that he could convince them that it was the right thing to do. He knew he had to honor his father's wishes. Throughout the debate, Nala stood firmly by Simba's side, her presence a calming influence amidst the chaos. She trusted Simba's judgment, knowing that he always had the best interests of the pride at heart. She spoke eloquently, reminding the lions of Simba's bravery, his compassion, and his unwavering commitment to justice. Even Timon and Pumbaa, who had initially been terrified by the prospect of hyenas in the Pride Lands, began to soften their stance. They observed Jire interacting with the lion cubs, her gentle nature and playful demeanor slowly easing their fears. One afternoon, they saw Jire sharing a juicy grub with a small, injured lion cub. The cub, initially hesitant, soon began to giggle, enjoying the treat. Timon and Pumbaa exchanged glances, a glimmer of understanding dawning in their eyes. Maybe they're not so bad after all," Timon whispered to Pumbaa. "Yeah," Pumbaa replied, nodding slowly. "She seems pretty nice, and that cub sure is happy." They approached Jire cautiously, their initial fear gradually giving way to curiosity. Jire greeted them warmly, her friendly smile putting them at ease. She told them stories about her clan, about their struggles, and about their hopes for a better future. Timon and Pumbaa listened intently, their hearts touched by Jire's sincerity. They began to see the hyenas not as monsters, but as individuals, each with their own story to tell. They finally understood. Slowly but surely, as the days passed, more and more lions began to come around, swayed by Simba's leadership, Nala's wisdom, and Jire's kindness. But still, many held doubts. The past was difficult to overcome. Finally, after days of intense debate and soul-searching, Simba made his decision. He gathered the pride once more, his voice filled with determination. "My friends," he announced, "I have listened to your fears, your concerns, and your hopes. I have weighed the risks and the rewards. and I have come to a decision." He paused, taking a deep breath. "I will honor Mufasa's promise. I will grant Jaire's clan a section of the Pride Lands, a place where they can live and hunt." A collective gasp swept through the crowd. Kovu stepped forward, his face a mask of fury. "You can't be serious, Simba. You're putting us all in danger." "I am serious," Simba replied, his voice unwavering. "But I'm also a king. And as king, I have a responsibility to protect my pride." He continued, "The hyenas will be given a designated area, far from the main Pride Lands. They will be required to follow strict rules designed to ensure peace and safety for everyone. They will not be allowed to cross into lion territory without permission. They will be required to hunt only within their designated area, and they will be held accountable for any wrongdoing." Simba looked at the faces of his pride, his eyes filled with hope. "I know this is a risk," he said, "but I believe it's a risk worth taking. I believe that we can find a way to live together in peace and harmony. I believe that we can rewrite the history between lions and hyenas." The final words rang out. Despite Simba's passionate plea, some lions remained unconvinced. Kovu, in particular, continued to harbor deep resentment towards the hyenas, his eyes filled with suspicion and distrust. He wasn't alone, a few older lions remembering the terror of Scar. "I don't trust them," Kovu muttered, shaking his head. "They'll never change. They're hyenas." However, even those who still harbored doubts were willing to trust Simba's judgment. They knew that he had always been a fair and compassionate leader. They reluctantly agreed to abide by his decision, hoping for the best but fearing the worst. Jire, witnessing the mixed reactions, stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. "Your Majesty, lions of the Pride Lands," she said, addressing the crowd, "I understand your fears. I know that we have a history of conflict. But I promise you, my clan and I will respect your laws, your traditions, and your way of life." She continued, "We will follow the circle of life. We will hunt only what we need, and we will do everything in our power to live in peace and harmony with you." Jire looked at Simba, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Your Majesty, for giving us this chance. We will not let you down." With a final nod, Jire turned and led her clan towards their new home, a section of land bordering the Outlands, a place where they could begin to build a new life. But Simba knew they would all be watching, and there was a rocky road ahead. The initial weeks were fraught with tension. The hyenas, unfamiliar with the abundance of the Pride Lands, sometimes wandered too close to the lions' hunting grounds, causing unease. The lions, in turn, often eyed the hyenas with suspicion, their distrust fueled by generations of animosity. There were misunderstandings, small conflicts, and moments of near disaster. But Jire, with her wisdom and patience, worked tirelessly to bridge the gap. She reminded her clan of their promise, emphasizing the importance of respecting the lions and following their rules. Simba, too, played his part, mediating disputes, enforcing the boundaries, and encouraging understanding. He spent time with both the lions and the hyenas, fostering communication and promoting empathy. Slowly, things began to change. Lions and hyenas started to interact more frequently, their initial suspicion giving way to curiosity and, eventually, friendship. They learned about each other's cultures, their customs, and their ways of life. The lion cubs, with their innocent curiosity, were often the first to break down the barriers. They played with the hyena pups, sharing games and stories, their laughter echoing across the plains. Even Kovu, though still wary, began to soften his stance. He saw Jaire's unwavering commitment to peace, her dedication to her clan, and her genuine desire for harmony. He started to realize that not all hyenas were like Scar. The change would be slow, but it was happening. He didn't have to like it. Just accept it. The uneasy peace had started. One evening, as Simba watched the lion and hyena cubs playing together, their laughter filling the air, he realized something profound. Mufasa's promise had been about more than just land. It was about understanding, forgiveness, and compassion. It was about breaking down the barriers that separated them, about recognizing their shared humanity, or rather, their shared animal ity. He finally understood the true meaning of the circle of life. It wasn't just about predator and prey, about the balance of nature. It was about interconnectedness, about recognizing that every creature, regardless of their species or their past, had a role to play in the grand tapestry of life. Simba smiled, a sense of peace washing over him. He had honored his father's promise, but he had done more than that. He had expanded the meaning of the circle of life, creating a new vision of the Pride Lands, a vision where lions and hyenas could live together in harmony. He looked at Jire, who was watching the cubs with a gentle smile on her face. He knew that the journey ahead would not be easy. There would still be challenges, misunderstandings, and moments of doubt. But he also knew that they were on the right path, a path towards a brighter future, a future where the old hatreds were replaced by understanding and respect. He saw the future, a good future, and Mufasa would be proud. Years passed. The Pride Lands flourished, a testament to the power of understanding and forgiveness. Lions and hyenas lived side by side, not always in perfect harmony, but always with respect and compassion. Kovu, though he never fully embraced the hyenas, learned to tolerate them, acknowledging their contribution to the well-being of the Pride Lands. He even found himself grudgingly admiring Jasire's leadership and her unwavering commitment to peace. The lion and hyena cubs grew up together, unaware of the old hatreds that had once divided their ancestors. They saw each other as friends, as equals, as members of the same community. Simba, now an older and wiser king, often looked out over the Pride Lands, his heart filled with gratitude. He had faced a difficult challenge, a challenge that had tested his leadership, his courage, and his compassion. But he had persevered, guided by the wisdom of his father and the unwavering support of his friends. He had learned a valuable lesson about leadership, about the importance of keeping promises, and about the power of understanding and forgiveness. He had proven that even old enemies could find a way to live together peacefully, that even the deepest wounds could be healed, and that even the most impossible dreams could come true. He had finally become the King Mufasa had always wanted him to be. The future was bright. The circle of life continued.